This is a video I've been wanting to do for a while, and I finally cut down my list to the top 5 lost films that I want to be found. It's estimated that nearly 3/4 of all films from the silent era are unaccounted for, and presumably lost forever. And they aren't all obscure, unpopular films either. In this video, I'll go through a mix of 5 different 1920s lost films that I would pay an obscene amount of money just to be able to watch once. They're in no particular order, because ranking them would have been too difficult for me. And also keep in mind, this is just my opinion. So without further ado, let's get into them. The first 2 films on this list kind of go together because they're both Colleen Moore movies. There are a lot of Colleen Moore films that have been lost, but these 2 are the most important for pop culture, I think. They are Flaming Youth from 1923 and We Moderns from 1925. Because Flaming Youth was released first and appears to have had better reviews, I'll start with that. I think the best place to start would be a description of the film in Photoplay magazine. There are 2 outstanding features about this picture. One is the exceptionally fine performance given by Colleen Moore, and the other is the fact that it is distinctly an ultra-jazz production. There have been many pictures of late emphasizing the shortcomings of our busy and boozy younger set. The crowd of young people in Flaming Youth sets a pace that would be hard to follow. But as the picture teaches, it's not entirely their fault. Some of the blame lies at the door of parents who have no control over their children, and who cannot find time to exercise control even if they had it. Miss Moore's acting stands out, and that means a lot in a cast which numbers also Milton Sills, Sylvia Bremer, Myrtle Steadman, and other screen notables. I guess if I absolutely had to choose between Flaming Youth and We Moderns, I think I would have to choose Flaming Youth. It was Colleen Moore's real breakthrough movie. It was earlier in the development of the screen flapper, and like I said before, it appears to have been a slightly bigger critical success than We Moderns. Speaking of We Moderns, let's move on to that. I found a description of the movie in an advertisement in Photoplay magazine. Colleen Moore's recent trip abroad was an ovation for the dainty star. During her stay in England, actual scenes were shot for We Moderns. Behind the wealthy traditional setting of Buckingham Palace, Trafalgar Square, and the highways and byways of London is a story of modern youth revolting against Victorian conventions. Miss Moore plays Mary Sundale, who, with her brother, leads the rising insurgents. Heedless of warnings, they ply their course among the ultra-smart set until catastrophe looms ahead. A crashing barrage of bitter disappointments and the sensational smash of Airplane and Zeppelin bring the drama to an emotional and wholesome conclusion. Another little blurb about the movie in Photoplay reads, "Too young to go to war, but old enough to go to the devil, so saith the subtitle, and 2, the best way to explain what it's all about." Colleen Moore struts through the picture with the breezy and carefree manner of the modern flapper. One can't help but delight in her. But not comparable with Sally or Flaming Youth. It's just Colleen's performance that is worthwhile. There is one surviving reel of Flaming Youth, which amounts to roughly 15 minutes of film, which is what you're looking at right now. But there is no known surviving footage from We Moderns. These 2 films were very popular at the time, and the reason I put them on this list might be pretty obvious to some, but I'll explain anyway. To most people now, flappers represent the 1920s, and movies like Flaming Youth and We Moderns are what really propelled the flapper image into the mainstream. Colleen Moore was the quintessential screen flapper of the mid-1920s, and many more became popular after she rose to fame. Although she wasn't the first, her version of the screen flapper was more developed than those before her. I mean, of course, that's mostly just an assumption on my part since both of these films are lost, but there's a lot of evidence that points to that. And of course, another reason is just because I'm a fan of Colleen Moore. I mean, who wouldn't be? Fun fact, We Moderns somehow managed to get a 5.5 star rating on IMDb despite being a lost film. Oh, and by the way, if you want to learn more about Colleen Moore, you can check out the video I made about her a while ago. Okay, my shameless plug is over, let's move on. The next film is one of the most sought-after lost films of any time period, and is the #1 1920s lost film on the British Film Institute's list of most wanted lost films. It's called Mountain Eagle, and was released in 1926. But why do so many people want to get their hands on it? Because it's the only lost film of the legendary director Alfred Hitchcock. It was the fifth feature film he directed and one of 10 silent films he made. There's actually a lot of lore and theories behind it, which just makes people want it even more. Hitchcock himself is said to have told others that the film was terrible, and up to that point, he regarded it as the lowest point in his career. Reportedly, the only reason Mountain Eagle was released was due to the success of Hitchcock's previous film, The Lodger, even though The Lodger was actually made after Mountain Eagle. It seems that Mountain Eagle saw a limited release in the UK and was also shown in the US, but I couldn't find any listings of it in Photoplay magazine, which probably means it didn't really make much of an impact for mainstream movie fans in the States. It was described in one advertisement as, quote, "a great dramatic story about the loves and hates of simple mountain folks," end quote. In a more elaborate summary, another advertisement described it as, quote, "the story of a feud between two men, which began over a woman, a drama of life in a small village in the mountains." This picture, with Nita Naldi and Malcolm Keane in the principal roles, has a special charm in its beautiful presentation of mountain scenery in summer and winter, end quote. But the most detailed description I could find was this: "The Mountain Eagle is a story of love and hatred amongst mountain folk. There is a feud over a woman between one Fulton and Pettigrew. The latter, as the local justice in a small village, naturally has considerable power. His crippled son, Edward, falls in love with Beatrice Brent, the schoolteacher appointed by his father, and gossip is rife. The narrative unwinds, as it were, from this incident. Beatrice has to seek refuge with Fulton, who arranges a marriage to still the tongues, and Edward, having fled, suspicion of having caused his death falls on Fulton. There are some striking snow scenes and fine mountain scenery and many exciting moments, such as where Fulton levels his rifle to shoot Pettigrew, and the latter faints and falls before a shot can reach him, instances in which the suspense is very ably contrived. The pursuit of Fulton across the snow plains is done with decision and force. It is also stated elsewhere that Fulton, one of the main characters, played by Malcolm Keane, is, quote, an individual who lives alone in the hills with only his dog for his companion, end quote. The dog actually appeared by itself on a lobby card for the film, and it makes me wonder if it had a more important role in the film than is let on by these summaries. Mountain Eagle was listed as containing 6,000 feet of film, which, according to a film footage converter I found online, comes out to about an hour-long film, which was maybe a little bit slightly lower than the average length of films at that time, but pretty normal, especially for a non-Hollywood movie. The main reason I put this film on the list is because I'm a big fan of Hitchcock's later films, though I don't yet know much about his silent ones. And the fact that Mountain Eagle is the only feature film of his that's lost is a perfectionist's nightmare. It's like putting together a 5,000-piece puzzle only to find that there's one piece missing. By most accounts, I think it's safe to say that Mountain Eagle was probably a fairly average or possibly below average film with some memorable moments. Nobody hailed it as a masterpiece, but Hitchcock fans everywhere desperately want to see his full development as a director, the good and the bad. Whichever category Mountain Eagle falls under will probably never be known for certain, but for now, all we have are some production stills and some lobby cards. So here's a lost film that isn't often talked about. It's titled Aloma of the South Seas. Released in 1926, it was a massive success, grossing $3 million, and was one of the top movies the year it was released. I couldn't find reliable box office numbers. It seems like they're taken from different sources and they don't always match with other rankings. One source said it was the fourth biggest box office success of the decade, and that it was the top grossing film of 1926. In other sources, it's not on either list, but whatever the case, it was a very popular film for the time, and that makes it more frustrating that it's completely forgotten. But it makes sense, really. It's been lost for so long, all the people who have seen it are dead now, so it naturally faded from the minds of film lovers everywhere. It's truly the curse of being a lost film. It also loses any legacy or retrospective cultural impact it might have had otherwise. Because this is the most popular film on this list, it was featured prominently in movie magazines. Here is a rather lengthy summary and review of the film in full. Here is a film of startling beauty, beauty as compelling and as perfect as any the screen has ever shown. It creates the South Seas as we all like to imagine them, palms tall and beautiful against skies piled with sullen clouds, far-flung white beaches lapped by scented seas, and native girls as radiant as hibiscus blossoms. Aloma reveals all this plus Gilda Gray. Almost all of Gilda is revealed, and what a personality she proves to be. Product of Middle Western poverty, product of Broadway's most hectic cabarets, winner of wealth and fame, something has saved Gilda Gray's great simplicity. She is as childlike and primitive as a man's first dream of love. She moves across the screen, undisturbed by it. Watching her, it is almost impossible to believe that it is her first important film role. She photographs perfectly, and so completely is she Aloma, one's only wonder is whether she can possibly play any other character. Compared with these factors, the story fades into insignificance, which is just as well, since it is an insignificant story. It's the old one about the soldier who left his sweetheart behind, who was reported killed but really wasn't, who returns to find the sweetheart married, and then goes to the South Seas to drown himself behind a heavy growth of whiskers and a row of whiskey bottles. Maurice Turner's direction is excellent. The playing of the cast, Warner Baxter as a native, Percy Marmont as the suffering gentleman, William Powell as the marrying rascal, is all that is necessary. But it is Gilda Gray and beauty that make Aloma a glorious experience. Take the children, it will be good for them. As you just heard from the excerpt, the main actress of the film was Gilda Gray, who played the title character of Aloma. That was her breakthrough picture, and she was rocketed to fame. As the photoplay review makes very clear, people weren't seeing the movie for the story. They wanted to see this youthful newcomer, Gilda Gray, play an exotic flapper. After the success of the movie, Gilda Gray signed a major contract with famous players Lasky. I also found an interesting little tidbit about the movie in this blurb from Photoplay magazine. A thrilling moment in Aloma of the South Seas, Gilda Gray's new picture, occurs when a shark eats a sailor. If you want this thrill, you naturally have to take it synthetic. The shark cost $3,000. It was made of flexible rubber, and its insides consisted of a maze of electric wiring. Outside the body were several buttons which the actor could operate in his fight with the shark. It swims, wiggles its tail, and bites electrically. The movie also stirred up other kinds of conversations, as this next excerpt shows. Plenty of brickbats were aimed at local censors who made changes in Variety and The Merry Widow. And Aloma of the South Seas inspired more letters than any other program picture of recent release. And here is one person's enthusiastic review of the movie. For sheer beauty, even though the company did go to Puerto Rico to film Samoan scenery, I believe Aloma of the South Seas deserves high praise. And the revelation of one Gilda Gray, where has she been all our lives? Now if only they won't spoil her, but I sometimes imagine they can't. Gilda surely runs away with the picture, and this in spite of the keen competition she has to meet in such seasoned players as Percy Marmont, Warner Baxter, and William Powell. Never have I seen the portrayal of a woman in love done with such vividness, especially in the closing scenes when she relinquishes the man she loves to another woman. Aloma of the South Seas really sounds like the kind of movie that would have been a hit, and it was. It undoubtedly had some kind of impact on popular culture, at least at the time it was popular, but it's difficult to pinpoint just what that would have been without being able to watch it. Ultimately, we'll just have to make do with the 1941 remake of the movie because the original will probably never see the light of day again. Most people interested in the 1920s will say that F. Scott Fitzgerald's novel The Great Gatsby is the literature best representative of the decade. So naturally, with that reputation, the film version made in 1926 would top the list of any 1920s lover. But of course, that film, just like all the others on this list, is lost. We don't know too much about the film, but the prospect of iconic Gatsby parties that were undoubtedly featured in the movie are enticing enough. Of course, we know the plot since the book is perfectly accessible. In looking for information on the movie, I was only able to find this rather unenlightening description in Photoplay magazine. F. Scott Fitzgerald's novel of the Great War's aftermath presented unusual film difficulties. Herbert Brennan, the director, has managed to retain much of the feeling of the story. Gatsby comes out of the war to achieve a fortune unscrupulously. He falls, of course, in the end, finding that happiness can't be won that way. Lois Wilson runs away with the film as the jazzy Daisy Buchanan, who flashes cocktails and silken you-know-she-wears-ems. The film did receive some backlash, apparently due to a debate on whether it was implied that Daisy Buchanan slept with Gatsby before marriage. Actress Lois Wilson also caused some controversy by cutting her long, beautiful hair for a bob. According to Motion Picture Classic magazine, Lois was, quote, One of the few in pictures who obeyed the old-fashioned conventions, end quote. I found a slightly more interesting tidbit in photoplay in light reference to this controversy. Actress Lois Wilson said, "As Daisy Buchanan in The Great Gatsby, I did something adult. I loved Daisy. I want to do more characters like her, no matter what they cost me." Daisy did Lois something, her hair for one thing, and much criticism for another. But as Daisy, Lois did act. She petted and smoked and got thoroughly pied-eyed before her wedding, married a man who was a terrible egg and loved him regardless. And impossible as that sounds for Lois, she did it beautifully. It's said that Fitzgerald and his wife, Zelda, both hated the film. And because Fitzgerald was so interested in the new, modern culture of the 1920s and one of its most dedicated proponents, it is entirely possible that the film wouldn't live up to our high expectations. But it would be nice to at least have some more 1920s party footage to use for my videos. An interesting coincidence is that Warner Baxter, the actor who played Gatsby, also played a character in Aloma of the South Seas, which was also on this list. The only surviving footage from the Great Gatsby film is the trailer, which you can find on my channel as well as other places online. This might also be a good time to quickly mention that the film version of Fitzgerald's earlier novel, The Beautiful and the Damned, is also lost. So, what did you think of my list? Was it similar to yours, if you have one, or completely different? Let me know in the comments. Of course, I wish all films were recoverable, but it's unlikely that any of the films in this list will ever resurface. But there's always that small, tiny chance that some or all of them are sitting in a film archive somewhere, forgotten. This is a great time to give a shout out to a few organizations you can support or donate to help find lost films or help preserve vintage films for the future. For example, there's the British Film Institute, which has a most wanted list for lost films of all time periods. There's also the Film Foundation, which was founded by the famous director Martin Scorsese. There's also the website lostfilms.eu, which archives the titles of lost films and also collects any possible information about them from its users. So I encourage anyone interested in the subject to donate to any of these or similar organizations to save and protect the history of film. It's possible I might do another video like this in the future if I can find enough interesting films to talk about. These were just my top picks. If you think another lost 1920s film would be good to include in a future video, let me know in the comments. Well, that's all for now, all you cheeks and gals out there, but stay tuned for more tales from the Jazz Age.